I Moments ago or hours ago, we've learned that Donald Trump has decided to announce a ceasefire between Iran and the United States. And we've learned the same thing from the Iranian sources, from the Iranian media, state media, and Iranian officials like the foreign minister of Iran, Abbas Araghchi. What he said, what they've learned so far, that both sides have decided to accept 2 week ceasefire. And the negotiation is going to start on Friday in Islamabad, in Pakistan. So I think the main question would be what has happened? Because today we were talking about it and there was no sign of negotiations. I talked with Professor Marandi, I talked with Iranian, my Iranian friends in Iran. There was no sign of negotiations behind the scene. And today we've learned that Iran canceled all sort of messages to the United States. So the main question would be, what has happened? How did it happen? I think it goes beyond what has happened today, because you remember when Donald Trump started putting these sort of ultimatums, talking about 48 hours. He started with 48 hours, then 5 days, then 10 days, and we got back again to 48 hours. Then he said Tuesday at 8 p.m. So you may wonder what is going on, what has happened. Why did the United States decide to behave like this? I think the main answer or the main point would be what is going on the battlefield. On the battlefield, what is happening, mostly Israel is running out of interceptors. The United States is not able to help Israel defending itself. All those radars during this war were destroyed. The latest radars were in Israel. Right now in Israel, they literally have no major radars to defend Israel. This is one of the major issues right now for Israel. And we have to understand this war, the concept of this war comes from the Israeli government, comes from Netanyahu administration. They wanted this war for such a long time. So the United States has decided to, as you remember, Marco Rubio said that they wanted to attack Iran. So the Iranian response would be the attack on American bases in the region. So that's why the United States has decided to, attack Iran. And as Marco Rubio put, a preemptive attack. It wasn't a preemptive, it was an aggression on the part of the United States and Israel. But after all, during the war, Iran has managed to measure all these escalations on the part of Israelis and the United States. So they have decided, you remember, in the initial days of the war, they went up with missiles, drones, they hit everything in the region. Basically, there is nothing to be used in the American bases in the GCC countries. So the only radars which were working somehow so far in the recent, in the last week, was those radars in Israel and in Jordan. Iran has managed to destroy all of them. It seems to me that most of the radars were destroyed. In Israel, it was those critical radars were destroyed, as at least what we've heard so far. So look at this image that came out today. It shows that, one of these interceptors in Israel, a David Sling interceptor missile, is from the 2026 stockpile. It shows how critical is the situation with the interceptors. On the other hand, not only the interceptors and the radars that were destroyed, the United States is running out of cruise missiles, JASSMs, and that's why, the offensive power is reducing as well. So offensively and defensively, they're not capable to continue the conflict, to continue the war. So what would be the solution for that? Putting an ultimatum there, threatening Iranians, as Donald Trump tried to put it out, we're going to destroy the civilization. We're going to destroy everything in Iran. So the other problem was the intelligence. They couldn't reach, they couldn't manage to find the critical, when it comes to missile production, drone production, critical points in Iran to hit them. So what else could they do? Attacking universities, bridges. Even yet today we've learned a synagogue was attacked. Everything. They attacked everything. Hospitals, everything. All these, mostly civilian facilities were destroyed, even pharmaceutical plants, all of this. So the question is, why did they do that? Because they didn't have the intelligence coming out of Iran. It's all, looking at the intelligence, looking at the offensive power, looking at the defensive capability. They were all depleted on the part of the United States. So what could be done to change the game? I think the last thing that the Trump administration tried to do was reach into Natanz, power plant in Isfahan, because they thought that they can go there and they can find the 460 enriched uranium, and they did some sort of raid in the southern part of Isfahan, which has totally failed. Many casualties in this operation. They didn't mention any of this. I don't know if there was, if some of these forces were killed, but it seems that there were many casualties, many wounded forces during this operation. This is the problem. The second problem that the United States has faced, it was the last, because as they were running out of interceptors and cruise missiles, so what can you do? B-2 bombers, they were still having B-2 bombers and going in Iran and hitting the targets, but they have to go deep inside Iran to hit the target. This is not possible, because they tried it before. We had the F-15E being intercepted by Iranian air defense system. They couldn't find air defense. And these are mobile air defense systems. They go to the, these underground cities. They come out and go inside, and nobody knows where are they located. Then the other point when it comes to the ceasefire is, you remember Donald Trump said 15 points. What were in those 15 points that the United States suggested to Iranians? It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a communication by Iranians. The United States tried to reach out to Iranians through the Pakistani government and sending them 15-point plan on the part of the United States. Basically, it was the total capitulation of Iranians. What was in that? Limitations on the ballistic missile program, no enrichment when it comes to the nuclear program, and they have to give up the Strait of Hormuz, to open it up, let it the way it was before the war started. Basic points in those 15 points, it's just the total capitulation of Iran. Iran said, no, we're not going to do that. So what did Iran do? They sent a counter plan to what the United States has suggested. Iran sent it 2 days ago to the United States. And since then, there was no communication. There was no, talks, negotiation, nothing. Just the Pakistani government was sending the messages from the United States and taking the message from Iran and sending that to the United States. So the final point on the part of Iran was sending this 10-point plan to the United States. And since then, there was no negotiation. There was no talk. That's why today, as we were talking about what has happened, what was going on, and there was no talks. I talked with Professor Marandi today. No talk, no negotiations. Because Iran said these 10 points should be satisfied, or we're not going to talk with you. There has to be some sort of permanent solution to what's going on, to this war. And Donald Trump said on Tuesday, 8 p.m., I'm going to announce, I'm going to attack you, I'm going to destroy you. But what was happening in his mind, he tried to do his best. He thought that the Iranian would somehow, capitulate. They say, "Oh, we're going to back down. He's going to destroy us. He's going to use, nuclear weapons and destroy everything." He mentioned, he didn't mention nuclear weapons, but when you talk about, destroying a civilization, a conventional war is not capable of doing that. You have to go beyond that. You have to use nuclear weapons. Even J.D. Vance today in Hungary, he said that we have tools in our arsenal that haven't been used so far, so we may use them. They did everything. They did everything to put this sort of psychological pressure on Iranian government to force them into some sort of capitulation. That didn't work. So if it doesn't work, what would you do? Iran didn't do it. Iran, they were not trying to negotiate with the United States. They just sent a plan, 10-point plan to the United States. There was no negotiations. Then Donald Trump himself negotiated. He was negotiating with himself. Nobody was there to negotiate with him. Iran simply sent the plan to you. You may understand this plan. You may agree with that, or we're not going to make any sort of deal. We're not going to talk with you. Donald Trump himself today decided to capitulate by accepting that he's going to negotiate based on the plan that Iran sent to the United States, 10-point plan. So the question is, what is in this 10-point plan? Basically, the plan, it mentions that Iran and the United States would never attack each other again. It basically means that the United States, together with Israel, they would never attack Iran again. The first point. The second point is the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, I think it was one of the, I would say it was a nuclear bomb. They attacked Iran to destroy Iranian capabilities, to do regime change, then destroy Iranian capabilities to produce nuclear bombs. But Iran, so far, what Iran has presented on the battlefield, they don't need nuclear bombs to defeat the United States together with Israel in the region. They don't need that. And the nuclear bomb of this is the Strait of Hormuz. What is happening in the Strait of Hormuz is going to be under the control of Iranian government forever. And they're going to manage, they're going to, charge all of these tankers that are trying to passing through the Strait of Hormuz. They're going to pay $2 million per tanker, per vessel. So this is huge, because when it comes to reparation and when it comes to devastation, we know that this war is totally about devastation, death, and destruction, not only in Iran, but also in Israel as well. We don't have that much of coverage from Israel. Nobody's reporting in it what's going on in Israel. We see the missiles going there mostly from outside, footage from outside those countries who are around Israel, who are taking some sort of photos, or we had a little bit of leakage of some media outlets sending, the destruction to some buildings, apartment buildings. But after all, we don't know what's going on strategically when it comes to these strategic, facilities in Israel. But hugely, Israel was hugely, the whole society was hugely influenced by this war. But the destruction is unbelievable. What's going on in Israel? Look at Haifa, Tel Aviv. You see some scenes of it's like Gaza when you look at what's going on in Israel. And coming back to the points of the Strait of Hormuz, I think the Strait of Hormuz right now is the most important gain on the part of Iranian, is the winning point on the part of Iranians. And the other point that was mentioned in 10-point plan is the Iranian right to enrich uranium on their soil. It's going to be this way. Iran going to enrich uranium on its soil. It's not going to be something different. That's why I think it's important. Ballistic missile, there is no talk about ballistic missiles. They're not even talking about limitation on ballistic missiles. It's not in this 10-point plan. All sanctions, primary and secondary sanctions, will be lifted from Iran. And it goes back to George Bush. And it's these devastating sanctions coming from, for many years, Iran's economy was under the sanctions from the United States. And I think it's going to be huge if they do something in that direction. The United States forces, they have to withdraw their forces from the region. The other point in this 10-point plan, compensation paid to Iran. I think finally we're going to learn that the compensation would be through the Strait of Hormuz, and what Iran would have, the gain that Iranian would have through the Strait of Hormuz, and the way that they're charging the tankers, all these countries that are passing through, that they're using the strait to pass through. Not only Associated Press, they reported just moments ago, reported that it's going to be managed by Iran and Oman. Basically, Oman is some sort of partner for Iran in that region, because they're part of that area as well. But it's going to be run by Iranians together with Omanis. They're going to be together. And the other point, that war ends on all fronts. It means that the war is going to end not only between the United States and Iran, it's going to end between Israel and Hezbollah, and it's going to end in Gaza. So this is the tricky part, is this part, I think, because it's so difficult to control Israel when it comes to the southern part of Lebanon and Gaza. I don't know how capable is the United States to control the Netanyahu administration. But after all, looking at what's going on, I think many people are arguing these 2 weeks of ceasefire would make some sort of leverage for the United States. They want to build up, they want to get back, hit Iran harder, or maybe with new missiles. But that's not going to happen, because the interceptor, the capabilities of the United States to produce these interceptors is limited. They cannot produce them. They could fight and produce these missiles, but it's not going to happen in 2 weeks. I think that nothing of that sort going to help the United States in 2 weeks.